Hi, my name's Karen Edwards, and I'm going to tell you a story today about how one of those horrible things that we don't like about summer, about how it came to be. Do any of you know what midgies are? I'm sure you do. Many's a summer evening you've probably sat in the garden and scratched and tried to get them off you. Well, this is how the midgies came to be. And it's a story that I heard first from a storyteller called Dougie Mackay from Scotland. He tells a wonderful version, and I hope you like this one. Long, long ago, longer ago than I can tell you, and twice as long as you can tell me, far away in the land of Norway, there were ice giants. Now, people thought that all the ice giants had been wiped out because at the very last battle, at the battle they called Ragnarok, the ice giants fought, and all the giants on that battlefield were killed. But there were some ice giants who were so slow and so lumbering that by the time they got to the battle was over. Well, they weren't going to go home again. And so they decided to stay in Norway. And they made their homes up in the mountains of Norway. And they settled there. Well, when the humans came to Norway, as you know, Norway has fjords, and the humans settled around the mouths of the fjords. At the coastal areas, they built their villages, they planted their crops. The ice giants were fed up with fighting. They didn't want to fight anymore. And so they and the humans signed a peace treaty. And they lived together in harmony. The giants up in the mountains, the humans down by the sea. But every year, when it came to the harvest time, the humans would have a celebration and they would invite the ice giants to come down and they would all party together and everything was grand. But there was one ice giant. There's always one. And he had a black, sour heart. And he decided that he didn't like the humans being in his country and he was going to get rid of them. So one dark October night, there was no moon in the sky. He lumbered slowly down the mountain. And when he came to the villages, he ripped apart the houses. He tore off the roofs. He chased the humans out of their villages. They ran as fast as they could with the giant lumbering after them. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. I'm going to gobble you up. They could hardly get away. And he bit off their heads and he sucked out their blood and he spat out the bone and the gristle, and the humans that could get away ran as fast as they could. Well, the other ice giants were furious with this giant Thrime, and they decided that they were going to throw him out of Norway. They weren't going to let him live there anymore. Thrime wasn't caring. He was fed up with Norway anyway. He wanted fresh meat. And so he waded out into the North Sea. The North Sea only came up to his knees. He waded right round the north coast of Scotland and down the west coast, and he came to the islands of Lewis and Harris. He couldn't find any fresh meat there because in those days, the only things that lived there were trolls. And everybody knows that the blood of trolls is thick and foul and sticky. And so he waded further down. He waded down past Rum and Egg and Barra and right down to the Isle of Jura. More trolls. No, Thrime wasn't interested in them. He didn't want them, so he kept on going. He waded down, he waded past Isla and past Gia, and he went right across the sea over to Donegal. When he got to Donegal, he was still uttering this chant, I'm going to catch you, I'm going to eat you, I'm going to gobble you up. Can you say it? I'm going to catch you, I'm going to eat you, I'm going to gobble you up. And the people of Donegal, they heard him before they could see him. And as he waded off the sea and onto the land, they fled for their lives. They fled south, they fled to Dunlow, they fled to Ballyshannon, as far away as they could. And when he came into Donegal, and when he got to the little town of Glenties, the people there, they decided they weren't going to flee. And they decided that they were going to think of a way to defeat this giant. But what were they going to do? They got together, they had a meeting. There was much scratching of foreheads and furrowing of brows, but they couldn't think of anything. And then one of them, an old wise woman, a woman who knew the ways of healing and the ways of the herbs and everything that of the old folklore, she put up her hand. I think we should send the children. Send the children? Are you mad? Send the children against a giant? Have you not any wit, old woman? But when they heard her plan, they thought maybe she had a point. And so that is exactly what they did. They sent the children to the hill outside Glenties, and they waited there, and they heard him before they saw him. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. I'm going to gobble you up. And they could smell his foul breath as he came up the other side of the mountain, and they could see his pockmarked face and his horrible gaps and his black teeth. Oh, it was disgusting. And do you know what those children did? They made the worst faces that you've ever seen. Let's see your worst faces. Oh, that's a good one. And they called him the most awful names that they could think of. You horrible scumbag. You greasy old maggot. Oh, it was dreadful. Well, Thrime was furious, and he tried to swipe down at the children and hit them and catch them. But those children, they knew every blade of heather on that mountainside. They knew every babbling brook, and so they were able to jump and leap and dance out of his way, and Thrime was too slow, he couldn't catch them. And they danced and they leapt all the way down the mountainside with Thrime lumbering so slowly after them. And when they got to the bottom of the mountain, the children ran off. But the people of Glenties, they had pulled across a long wire, and Thrime was caught. He tripped over the wire, he flew up in the air, somersaulted, and upside down he fell into a huge pit that the people of Glenties had dug. For they were very used to digging turf, and they could dig a pit like no other. In the pit, they had positioned spears that were spiked at the top, and Thrime fell on the spears and was impaled on them. And the people of Glenties shouted, "We have saved Donegal from the giant Thrime. Let's party." And they danced and they partied and they feasted all night, and they went to their beds. And in the morning, from their beds, they heard it. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. I'm going to gobble you up. And they thought, what is this? They got out of their beds. They ran to the pit, and there was the giant Thrime trying to prise himself off the spears. What could they do? The bravest of them ran to their sheds. They got their axes. They got their knives. They jumped down into the pit, and they chopped up that giant Thrime into tiny pieces. Hooray! We have saved Donegal from the giant Thrime. We will celebrate. And so they partied, they danced, they feasted all night. They went home and they went to their beds. And in the morning, from their beds, they heard, I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. I'm going to gobble you up. And they got out of their beds and they ran to the pit, and there were all these little pieces of meat jumping up and down in the pit. What could they do? They went to the forest. They got wood. They brought it back. They lit a huge bonfire in that pit, and they burned those pieces of meat until there was nothing left but ash. Hooray! We have saved Donegal finally from the giant Thrime. And they had the biggest party of all. And they walked home with their arms round each other, and they got into bed exhausted. And in the morning, from their beds, no more than a whisper, they heard it. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to eat you. I'm going to gobble you up. And they ran to the pit, and they looked, and all the little pieces of ash were shimmering and dancing up and down in the pit. And a gust of wind came and blew them all over the people of Glenties, and they were scratching, and indeed it was eating them and catching them and gobbling them up. And that is how the Midgies came to be. and the Midgies were blown by that gust of wind all over Donegal and back across the sea to Scotland. And today they persist to this day. And we don't call them Ash or the giant thrine. We call them the Midgies. Thank you.